I let my parents tell everyone at Thanksgiving that my sister paid my rent again as a joke. When they laughed and called me a leech in front of her boyfriend's family, I got up, took out my phone, and said one sentence that changed everything. I am a 37-year-old daughter in a family that never really saw me. Not really. I've spent most of my adult life keeping a safe emotional distance from them because every time I got close, I ended up regretting it. But every so often, I let my guard down. This Thanksgiving, I did. And I paid for it. I live in Albany, New York, in a modest but comfortable apartment that I've managed to hold on to for nearly a decade now. I work full-time as a paralegal at a mid-sized law firm. It's not glamorous, but I built a stable life. I'm not married. I don't have kids. But I have a cat, Olive, close friends, and a cozy, quiet rhythm I've come to appreciate. My sister, Talia female, 31, is the golden child. She lives in Manhattan in a luxury apartment, travels to places like Santorini and Milan, and works in some high-powered corporate finance role that I don't fully understand. She's beautiful in that put-together, Instagrammable way, and she has always known how to impress people, especially our parents, Barry and June. They live in a large colonial-style home in Saratoga Springs and care deeply, obsessively, about appearances. I mean, they put out catered cheese boards for casual backyard BBQs. They airbrush family photos and hire stylists for Christmas cards. I learned a long time ago that anything less than a perfect presentation is seen as a failure in their eyes. I've always been the practical one. The quiet one. The one who paid her own way through SUNY, skipped vacations to save for emergencies, and learned to do car repairs on YouTube. And yet somehow, in every version of my parents' narrative, I'm the one who never made it. When Talia announced that she would be bringing her new boyfriend Ronan to Thanksgiving this year, along with his parents, I should have expected something would go sideways. Because when new people enter the orbit of my family, my parents turn into an exaggerated version of themselves. Image. Status. Prestige. I told myself it was fine. It was just one day. I'd show up, eat dinner, smile politely, and drive home. What I didn't expect was to become the punchline of the evening. We were halfway through dinner. The table was crowded with the usual stuffing, turkey, cranberry sauce from a can because June insists the homemade kind looks like blood, and multiple bottles of overpriced wine with handwritten menus beside each plate. At some point, someone asked Ronan's dad what it was like retiring from architecture and whether he missed the work. That's when Talia chimed in about how she and Ronan had so much in common because they both balance practicality and creativity. It was an obvious cue for my parents to brag about her career, which they did, and compare it, tactfully, but unmistakably, to mine. Then June, smiling in that sharp-toothed way she reserves for her most passive-aggressive moments, said, "Oh, and thank you again, sweetheart, for helping your sister with rent. You're just such a generous soul." That comment hit the table like a dropped glass. You know when a joke lands wrong and everyone waits to see who's laughing first? I froze. Talia waved her hand dismissively and said, "Oh, it's nothing." She's basically my tax write-off at this point, followed by the most smug little grin. And just like that, everyone laughed. Like it was an inside joke they'd all been let in on but me. June giggled. Barry chuckled. Even Ronan's dad gave one of those awkward haha polite smiles. Ronan didn't laugh. He just looked, surprised. And I sat there, with my fork halfway to my mouth, tasting nothing but acid in the back of my throat. Because it wasn't true. Talia has never paid my rent. Not once. In fact, I've never needed her to. There was one time, years ago, when my car broke down and I borrowed $100 from her to cover a tow. I paid her back in full the next month, plus a $20 Starbucks gift card as a thank you. That was it. That was the entirety of the financial support she's ever given me. But this wasn't the first time they'd made this joke. It was just the first time they'd done it in front of strangers, people whose opinions seemed to matter more than mine ever did. My hands were shaking, but not visibly. I've learned how to hide that. Years of swallowing pride has made me a quiet expert at masking how I feel. But this time, I didn't want to. I took a breath. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and said, "Hey Siri, play the voice memo from November 12th. Everyone turned toward me like I'd just announced I was pregnant with a demon child. Then the recording began to play. My voice, followed by hers. Thanks for covering dinner, but no, you're not paying my rent. I've got it, Talia. I always have. You know that. Then her voice. Crystal clear. Sarcastic and smug, I know, I just like saying I do in front of mom and dad. Makes me look good. The sound that followed wasn't silence. It was a collapse of noise. Forks being set down. A cough from Ronan's mother. Talia inhaled like she'd been caught stealing. I tapped the phone to stop the playback and placed it face down on the table. My father tried to recover. Oh, come on, it was clearly just a little joke. I turned to him, my voice quiet. Controlled. Tired. No. You all treat it like a joke, but you never correct it. You've let this narrative sit out there like mold in the open air, and you've let it grow because it makes Talia look good. Because it makes me look small. Then I turned to Talia. And you've known it wasn't true. But you let it go on. Because you enjoy it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Ronan was looking at her in a way I don't think she was used to. I wasn't finished. And if we're really going to talk about financial support, I continued, maybe we should mention the $30,000 I paid for Dad's legal fees after that zoning lawsuit in 2019. Or the fact that I co-signed on Mom's SUV when her credit was in the tank. Or the time I helped Talia write her business school essays because she was too busy. But yeah, let's all keep laughing at how pathetic I am. Nobody was laughing anymore. The energy at the table shifted hard after that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. That, I think, made it worse for them. I was too calm. Calm doesn't allow for the kind of denial they all rely on. Talia wouldn't look at me. Her carefully applied foundation couldn't hide the blotchy red climbing her cheeks. She reached for her wine but didn't drink it. Ronan leaned away from her slightly, his hand no longer resting casually on the back of her chair. My parents were still processing. Barry's face had that stunned look of someone who just got caught with their fly down and isn't sure who noticed. June was trying to calculate in her head what the proper social response was, whether to apologize, pivot, or pretend nothing had happened. Ronan's mother, Irene, folded her napkin slowly and said in a voice just loud enough to be heard, I think we'll be heading out now. Thank you for the meal. Walter nodded, stood, and placed his napkin on the table. Yes, it's getting late. It was barely 6:15. They didn't rush. That was almost worse. They walked out with that kind of deliberate calm that rich people use when they're deeply uncomfortable but don't want to be impolite. Ronan looked at Talia and murmured something. I couldn't hear it, but he didn't offer her his arm when they followed his parents out. The moment they were gone, June stood up sharply and grabbed the half-finished bottle of wine from the center of the table. She poured herself a glass, then a second. Barry was still staring at his plate, as though if he just sat still long enough, this whole thing might vanish. I stayed seated. For a while, no one spoke. The clink of June's spoon against her dessert ramekin was the only sound. Finally, Barry cleared his throat and tried again. You blindsided us, Marla. I turned to him. No. You humiliated me. Again. I just didn't let it slide this time. He tried to say something else, but June cut him off, voice high-pitched and tight. You always find a way to ruin things, don't you? One dinner. Just one, where you don't make it about you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not loudly, but with that bitter edge that creeps up when you realize just how little someone understands you. Right, I said. Because sitting there while you paint me as a dependent embarrassment isn't making it about me at all. Talia finally spoke. Her voice was shaky. You didn't have to record me. That was a total ambush. I tilted my head. Would it have mattered if I hadn't? You would have just denied it. Like you always do. You knew it wasn't true. You let them believe it. Worse, you wanted them to. She didn't argue. She just stared at the tablecloth like it had the answers. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and began gathering my coat. No one stopped me. Olive would be waiting, and at that moment, the thought of her curled up by the window felt like the only warm thing I had. As I stepped into the hallway and pulled on my boots, June called from behind me. You're still family, Marla. Don't forget that. I turned just enough to see her over my shoulder. I haven't forgotten. I just finally learned what that really means. I drove home in silence. No music. No phone calls. Just the hum of the highway and the sound of my heart beating harder than usual. When I got home, I took off my coat, sat on the edge of the couch, and let Olive hop into my lap. She stretched her tiny paws, purred once, and settled in. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't healing. But it was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying their weight with me. The days that followed were strange. Quiet, but strange. I got 2 texts from Talia. Talia, I didn't think it would go that far. I'm sorry. Talia, the next day Ronan hasn't called. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not out of spite, but because I didn't know who she expected sympathy from. Me? A few days later, I got an email from my mother. Not a call. Not even a text. An email. She wrote, "We all said things we regret." It was an awkward moment. I'm sure Talia didn't mean it the way it sounded. Next time, maybe we can avoid such confrontational moments. Holidays are meant to bring us together. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was tempted to reply, but because of the sheer absurdity of it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement. It was a PR statement written by someone who doesn't know how to express shame. I archived it. People talk about family like it's sacred. Like it comes with built-in loyalty and love. But sometimes, family is just a group of people you've known the longest who also know exactly where your weak spots are. I'm not perfect. I've held grudges. I've rolled my eyes behind their backs. I've said no more than a few times when they expected yes. But I've also been the one who cleaned up their messes. Paid their bills. Showed up when no one else would. And the only version of me they ever saw was the one they could turn into a punchline. I didn't set out to expose anyone. I didn't come to Thanksgiving with a hidden agenda. I recorded that voice memo for myself, originally. Because I'd been gaslit so many times by them that I started needing proof. Just so I could remember what was real and what wasn't. Funny how it turned out to be the one thing that made them listen. Kind of. In the days that followed, I kept expecting something more. A real apology. A visit. Even a half-hearted phone call where my dad muttered, "We messed up," before quickly pivoting to the weather. But none of that came. The silence wasn't surprising, but it still stung. Instead, I got little breadcrumbs of shame disguised as normalcy. June forwarded me a holiday recipe email chain as if Thanksgiving hadn't imploded. Barry liked an old Facebook photo of mine. Talia sent me a random TikTok with no caption, like we were just fine. Like none of it had happened. I didn't respond to any of it. It was my friend Nadia who helped me make sense of the whole thing. We'd worked together years ago at a legal nonprofit and had stayed close. She was one of the few people who truly got me without requiring context. "You know what that was," she said during one of our coffee catch-ups at Uncommon Grounds downtown. "That wasn't a family dinner. That was a stage performance. And you ruined the script." She wasn't wrong. My family doesn't live their lives. They curate them. June treats everything like a Pinterest board: family, holidays, even grief. When her sister passed away last year, she spent more time organizing the floral arrangements and hiring a photographer than she did speaking to anyone who actually knew her. Talia fits into that perfectly. She always has. She's good at appearances. Good at saying the right thing to the right people and making them feel lucky to be near her. But when that mask slips even just an inch, she doesn't know what to do. A week after Thanksgiving, I ran into someone from our high school, Raina Dorsey, while grabbing groceries. We weren't close back then, but we knew each other enough for polite conversation. "I saw your sister at the wine bar last night," she said as we stood in the checkout line. She looked off. You know, like someone just lost a promotion or a boyfriend. I didn't say much. Just nodded and smiled. It wasn't satisfying. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like witnessing the fallout of a tower slowly falling apart because someone finally stopped pretending the foundation wasn't cracked. 2 weeks later, Talia texted me again. "Talia, Ronan and I are taking a break. He said he needed space to figure things out. I guess he's not who I thought he was." That was the first time she'd broken the curated tone. No exclamation points. No smiley face. No, but it's for the best. It wasn't a conversation starter. It was a white flag. But I didn't respond to that either. I didn't want to keep carrying her grief when mine had never mattered. It might sound harsh, but the emotional labor I'd done for that family had spanned decades, and I wasn't interested in putting in overtime for someone who used me as a prop. Around mid-December, Barry reached out. It wasn't an email. Not a text. An actual phone call. I was at home, stringing up fairy lights around my small window when my phone rang. His name popped up on the screen, and my first instinct was to ignore it. But something in me, curiosity, maybe, answered. His voice was flat, almost apologetic in that awkward dad way that feels like someone trying on clothes they're not used to wearing. "Hey, Marla." "Hi." A pause. "I wanted to see how you're doing." Another pause. I wasn't going to help him out of the awkwardness. "I'm okay." "That's good. Look, we've been talking. Your mom and me. And maybe things got a little out of hand at Thanksgiving." I said nothing. Maybe we laughed when we shouldn't have. I think everyone kind of jumped at the wrong moment. Still nothing. "And Talia's going through a rough patch right now. She misses you." That caught me off guard. He continued, "I guess I just wanted to say, we didn't mean for it to go that way. Not I'm sorry. Not we were wrong. Just we didn't mean for it to go that way." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "I'm not coming for Christmas." "Oh. I mean it. I'm not doing this again. I'm not sitting at that table so you all can pretend I'm part of a family that doesn't see me." He was quiet for a beat too long. "I understand." And to his credit, he didn't argue. He didn't try to guilt-trip me with some story about tradition or how June was heartbroken. He just said, "Okay. I get it," and hung up. That was the first time I ever heard my father not try to win an argument. Christmas Eve came and went. Instead of driving to Saratoga Springs, I stayed in Albany. I made cinnamon rolls from scratch for the first time, binge-watched black and white movies, and took Olive for a leash walk around the quiet neighborhood, which was lit up with more Christmas lights than I'd ever seen. Nadia came over on Christmas Day with a bottle of Prosecco and a tray of tamales from her aunt's kitchen in Schenectady. We didn't talk about my family. We didn't need to. It was the first holiday in my adult life where I didn't cry on the drive home. Then, 3 days after Christmas, June finally broke her silence. She called. I didn't answer. Instead, she left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, as if she had to force every word past her teeth. "Marla. It's your mother. I just want to say I hope you had a nice holiday, and, well, I'm sorry things went the way they did. We all made mistakes. Maybe next year, we can start fresh." I saved the voicemail. Not because it moved me, but because it was the closest thing to an admission I was ever going to get from her. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't ownership. But it was less curated. A sliver of something unfiltered. That was new. January rolled in quietly. After the holidays, the firm picked up pace again and I threw myself into work. I didn't have some grand plan for revenge. I wasn't plotting anything. But I also wasn't pretending anymore. That decision, to stop pretending, was more powerful than I realized. Word had started spreading. Not because I told people, but because families like mine can't survive long without gossip. I hadn't blocked Talia, but I also hadn't responded to her increasingly vague texts. "Talia, so, just wondering, do you think Ronan will ever talk to me again?" Talia, a week later, "Mom's been a wreck. You know how she is." Talia, "I told them the rent thing was a joke. They're just upset that it wasn't funny to anyone else." Every message seemed more desperate. She didn't understand why her social circle was changing. But I did. See, Ronan may have been mild-mannered, but his family was well-connected. His mother, Irene, sat on the board of a non-profit with one of Talia's firm's largest clients. And after the Thanksgiving fallout, a few things started happening. The firm dropped a pitch that Talia had spent months preparing for. Her mentor began pulling away, assigning fewer leadership opportunities. She'd become, slowly but noticeably, less golden. Not because of me. Because of her. That's the thing with curated lives, they crack easily once someone stops holding up the facade for you. I hadn't even told anyone about the recording. I didn't need to. But people talk. And people listen, especially when the story involves a woman who's built her success on polish and perception. By early March, she called me. I watched the phone ring for a full minute before I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. The next day, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Inside, it said, "Marla, I messed up. Not just Thanksgiving. All of it. I let them laugh at you for years. I laughed, too. I thought it made me look better. But I see now it made me look worse. You've always carried more than any of us. You never made it a big deal. That's what made it easy for us to pretend you were just less. I don't know how to fix what I've done. I don't even know if you want to hear from me. But I'm sorry. For all of it." Talia, it was the first real apology I'd ever received from her. I read it twice, then set it aside. Not out of spite, out of peace. The kind of peace you feel when you realize someone finally gets it, but you no longer need anything from them. That weekend, I met with a real estate agent. I'd been saving for a down payment for years. I didn't have a trust fund. No parental help. But I had discipline. And when you stop pouring emotional energy into relationships that only take from you, you'd be amazed at how much more clearly you can focus. By June, I closed on a small fixer-upper in Albany. A tiny Dutch colonial with peeling paint, a crooked porch, and a wild backyard I couldn't wait to tame. The morning I got the keys, I took a photo with Olive in my arms in front of the house and posted it on Facebook with a short caption, "Bought my first home. 100% self-funded. No handouts. No help. Just hard work." For anyone out there being treated like the black sheep, you're probably just the scapegoat. Walk away. Build your own table. The post blew up. People I hadn't heard from in years commented, messaged, and shared. Old college friends. Former coworkers. Even a few of Talia's socialite friends who, apparently, had quietly watched the Thanksgiving drama unfold and now saw the full picture. Talia didn't comment. Neither did June. But Barry did. He wrote, simply, "Proud of you, Marla. You've always been stronger than we realized." That was enough. Later that summer, I hosted a small barbecue in my overgrown backyard. Just friends. No curated menus, no matching outfits, no airbrushed photos. Just real people, paper plates, cheap beer, and laughter that didn't come at anyone's expense. At one point, someone asked, "Do you talk to your family anymore?" I shrugged. They still exist. I'm just no longer on display. That night, as I cleaned up, I looked around at my crooked little porch, the fairy lights strung between mismatched trees, and the folding chairs my friends brought over. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free.